In the spirit of no OBS episode going by without sort of a James Dara reference, the James Dara effect has now bled over into my personal and social media life because he liked a post that was posted about me on Instagram. I cannot get away from this man. I welcome him. He's a delight. And thank you for all you're doing for the art form.
On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, this is America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm your host, George Cederquist, joined by Oliver Camacho, Weston Williams, and Ashlee Hardgrave. All right, this week we induct another seminal composer into the OBS Hall of Fame. Hint, think Susanna with an H. Plus 2-minute drill. I mean, who can afford to study opera anyway? According to Hollywood, it's wealthy white women, and they're not wrong. If you're watching on TDO, you're going to wonder why I quit my Monday night poker game here in the den to record a podcast, and you can just subscribe to that podcast on Stitcher or even just favorite the show on Apple Podcasts. Sports in the fall is finally happening. I'm thrilled. Oliver, how do you feel?
I feel very American today. We have a very American subject, and we have very American panelists, as always. Go America.
Weston Williams, you might be the most hirsute member of the OBS team.
Hirsute? Did you say hirsute?
Hirsute, baby.
We don't know what he looks like
suit.
underneath that shirt.
My suit.
Dreadful. Ashlee Hardgrave, I loved texting you over the weekend with one word.
Oh.
Ouch.
Yeah. And then I wrote, it's not great. No, it was good. In the weekly Arkansas Razorback update that nobody asked for and nobody cares about, it was a rough weekend for my Razorbacks. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, as my grandma used to say. They played a top 2, like literally the number 2 team in the country at home. Their Cinderella end had to come at some point, and honestly, they needed a little bit of pressure on the road, but still, losing 30-something to nothing is never good. But the rest of the schedule is a little bit leaner, except when we play my friend Weston's Alabama. So
roll Tide.
Oh yes,
we're gonna hype that on the OBS. It was indeed an ugly loss. It was almost as ugly as tailgating before the Bears-Lions game on Sunday. A friend of mine took me. I've been to Bears games before, but I've never been tailgating. Oh my Lord, was it sloppy out there? Wow. Perhaps I'll put a picture or two on the website.
Did the Bears win? I have no idea.
The Bears did win. So while you were tailgating at the Bears-Lions game, I was at the other Detroit-Chicago game that was happening, which was the Tigers-White Sox, which was the very last game of the regular season. Speaking of sloppy fangoers, learned a lot.
Let us talk.
So wait a second, because I don't watch football yet. I'll watch the Super Bowl, but I won't watch anything before. Wasn't there something about like we have a quarterback and he like was put out for the first time and he did badly, and then they're gonna move to Arlington Heights? Like I felt like there's a bunch of Bears news this week, and there was a lot of news. We've as I've mentioned previously in some social media for OBS, we have kind of a problem where we're putting up a production of Barber, and we have 3 dudes that we've hired to sing Figaro, and none of them can get all the way through the key aria of the production. And so I get it. I understand.
I put it in terms you can understand, Oliver. So we have this guy, Justin Fields. People have been really excited about him. He's this phenom from Ohio State.
But is he handsome?
He's terribly handsome.
Yeah, okay.
You will be all in. Trust me.
Yeah.
For you and me, he checks a lot of boxes.
Okay.
So everybody was kind of hanging their hat on him as this big hope, and it hasn't matriculated in the way that we had hoped. So like our quarterback that we had, not so great. Our backup quarterback, basically non-existent. Our new young upstart that we really thought was going to be like the savior of the team, also not matriculating in the way that we would have hoped. And on top of all of this is the fact that Soldier Field and the Chicago Bears, they're not coming to an understanding. Basically, the Bears want a bigger stadium, and the the area that is Soldier Field cannot expand any larger, and there's no other place within the city of Chicago that can basically hold them. I don't know if you guys know this, but Chicago actually cannot host a Super Bowl because we do not have the seating capacity required for an actual stadium to have a Super Bowl.
I did not know that.
That and dreadful weather in the first week of February.
Also true.
Also that, but they've had it in New York. It's the thing. So there's been all of this talk of them going out to Arlington Heights, where there is this
northwestern suburb of Chicago, for those who
correct,
know.
which is this suburban Chicago. This now dormant racetrack is just sitting there. So there's been this push me, pull you, will they, won't they, with the Bears and the city of Chicago and the mayor of the city of Chicago, and everybody's trying to keep everybody happy. But news broke at the end of last week that the Bears have entered a purchase deal with this suburban venue. If you want my hot take, it's this: they're gonna do a year out at Arlington while architects come together to refashion and dig down into the earth of Soldier Field, because the only direction they can go is down. They're going to pull a University of Michigan, and it's going to look small from the outside. They're going to dig down into the earth, and then they're going to make the stadium bigger by going down instead of up.
We're going to get to opera architecture, actually, too. Let's talk.
Architecture Day on Opera Box Score.
We did it!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, this is OBS Hall of Famer, our enthusiastic yet humble salute to a distinguished opera artist who has gone above and beyond to contribute greatly, distinctively, and with grand significance to the art and honor of opera.
On September 30, composer Carlisle Floyd died at age 95 in Florida. His most well-known opera, Susanna, is routinely in the top 10 most performed operas by American composers.
That's what the H does.
But there's a longer list of works by Floyd that bear looking at and listening to as we induct Carlisle Floyd into the hallowed halls of the OBS HOF. Weston, give us that intro on Floyd Carlisle, or should I say Carlisle Floyd, and why he's important.
Well, he's really one of those opera composers that I feel like when a lot of people hear his name, they really only know Susanna, which is a real shame, because I would make the, I think, very strong argument that Carlisle Floyd is the incarnation of American opera in every way. Because if you think about the history of American opera took a little while to get off the ground, right? So obviously America as a country did not really exist until the late 1700s. So starting off a little bit slow there. Also, as a colonial power, it was coming from, the English, which also was not a great opera power compared to much of Europe, arguably. There was a bit of a gap between Handel and Benjamin Britten. And
Gilbert and Sullivan, hello.
Just a little.
God.
Yeah, I rest my case.
Coming in. Cederquist coming in with the GNS, always. Death, taxes, and Cederquist mentioning GNS.
So in America, you have really the ingredients for you really want America to have this big national classical music operatic style once you hit the 1800s, because every country that's cool is doing it. Russia starts producing nationalistic operas that are really unique, based in Russian sounds. All the Eastern European countries start doing this. French and German opera start to really square off, and it becomes very obvious very quickly. Even if you don't know the language, you hear a couple phrases of music and you know exactly where it comes from. Not so much in the U.S. The U.S. did not have the same funding as Western Europe for a lot of music, and so once you get to the early 20th century, the most American sound you have is a lot of American composers imitating Dvorak's New World Symphony, which, what is a good symphony and based in really genuinely American things, especially, spirituals and things like that. But it really is kind of an imitation. And then you have, at the beginning of the 20th century, some experimentation with sort of the Ives school of hypermodernism, which is not very pleasant to listen to unless you're me. And it's not very conducive to opera. So you go all the way until the 1950s. And here comes Carlisle Floyd and a few others around the same time. Carlisle Floyd is kind of caught in the middle of an interesting period of compositional history, right? Because in the middle of the 20th century, you have the hyper avant-garde, high art types sort of dominating everything. You got your Pierre Boulez's and your second Viennese school's grandchildren, and everyone is trying to find the newest, hardest sound to listen to. And Americans don't really respond well to that as an audience. What Americans are going to are musicals, but everyone in the high art world who does opera is like, those are just musicals. Those are low art. Those don't count. What Carlisle Floyd does differently is that he does not make the distinction between high and low art. I read an interesting article in one of his obituaries talking about how he listened to quite a lot of like German music, very advanced, very experimental stuff, as well as like, Puccini and stuff. But he never felt tempted to compose in those styles. He wanted to use what Americans regionally found interesting in music, tonal things, folk music melodies, and bring those to the forefront in a way that wasn't creating something from nothing.
And he was the real deal as a Southerner, right?
Absolutely. He was born in South Carolina, I believe, and he lived in Tennessee for a while, Florida. He hopped over to Texas, but he has this really Southern flavor to his music and his librettos. I think even a lot of his librettos that he wrote that don't take place in the South still have a very Southern sensibility to them, which I really appreciate because, as a Southerner, myself, born and raised in Alabama, Roll Tide, I really find it intriguing when those kinds of sounds, which you don't ordinarily associate with high opera, come through in the music.
Let's take a look at Susanna, the best known Floyd opera.
Well, before we do, let's actually take a little musical pause right now.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are watching the Dallas Opera Network, so sorry, but we are going to sample a little bit of the studio recording.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. How we wrap up each and every show. We're going to start with Oliver Camacho. Oliver, what do you got for us this week?
So this is not going to help the publicity effort at all for Lyric Opera of Chicago, but I saw Elixir of Love, and it will close this Friday with Eileen Perez as Adina and Charles Casanovo as Nemorino. Two singers who you would not expect in those light lyric roles, but man, was it like balls to the wall singing. It was so good, and they both took their moments. And Una Furtiva Lagrima literally made me cry. It was so good. So was Adina Credimi, the first act finale. And Eileen Perez, I've been saying this about her, that she's not like your ethereal, floaty soprano, but she did so much floating throughout the evening, and basically sang Prendi, the aria that closes the opera, on the thread of a voice. And it was so impressive. I just cannot praise it enough. So congratulations to Lyric Opera for putting together that cast.
Matt Cummings not here on the show this week, so no good call or bad call. Weston Williams on the show this week, but no good call or bad call. Ashlee Hardgrave.
In the spirit of no OBS episode going by without sort of a James Dara reference, the James Dara effect has now bled over into my personal and social media life because he liked a post that was posted about me on Instagram. I cannot get away from this man. I welcome him. He's a delight, and thank you for all you're doing for the art form. But yeah, and the reason that I got liked by James Dara in an Instagram post is because I was at the Theater Squared premiere of the stage play of Designing Women. Yes, after the very popular television show from the 80s and 90s. So it's basically a taking of that setting of those four sassy Atlanta women and putting them in 2020. How would they respond now? What would they do with the election of 2020 in their Atlanta design firm? So not operatic, but definitely got liked by someone who's tied to opera, so it all works out. If you are interested in seeing this production of Designing Women, you can look up Theater Squared. That's theater with an R-E and then the word squared written out. And there are streaming performances that you can watch from anywhere beginning October 15th.
Keep those checks coming, Jimmy! That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera.
We're
Our
a very
announcer
American show.
Is Norm Woodel. He's at normwoodel.com. On Facebook, you're going to search Opera Box Score. Twitter, Instagram, at Opera Box Score. Help us deepen that bench of listeners liking, sharing our social media posts. Email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. And you can, remember, subscribe to the podcast on Stitcher, especially if you watch on TDO. You want to get the full cut on the podcast. You can even just favorite the show on Apple Podcasts, like and subscribe. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is Weston Williams. For your co-host, Ashlee Hardgrave, I'm George Cederquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you drink cold beers in a warm stadium parking lot. We're back with an all-new show next week. We go inside the huddle with stage director Katura Stakhan. She's also the host of the podcast Words First, Talking Text in Opera. Plus, you're going to get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more Arkansas football losses.
How very dare you?
Join us.